Hey there, it's Ariane Alexander. Are you ready to rock your life today with me? Oh my goodness, we're going to have so much fun. My guest today is the most amazing woman, Terri Cole. She is a licensed psychotherapist and global relationship and empowerment expert with a brand new book out called Boundary Boss, the essential guide to talk true, be seen, and finally live free. And I don't know about you, but I could use some help with my boundaries. Always. She has, for over 2 decades, Terri's worked with a diverse group of clients that includes stay-at-home moms, celebrities, Fortune 500 CEOs. And what I love about Terri is she has a gift for making these psychological concepts about boundaries accessible and actionable. What you're going to hear today is how she breaks everything down for you so that you can look at all areas of your life, from relationships to work to everything that you have in your life, and make your boundaries stronger. So let's dive right in, shall we?
Terri, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to talk to you because I have heard about you for so long. You've been on many of my friends' radio shows. And so here we are. Thank you.
Well, Ariane, I'm so happy to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, boundaries are a big thing for everyone. And as I've learned from reading over your materials and what you do, boundaries encompass every aspect of life, from personal relationships to business relationships to everything in between. So I'm curious, in your experience and your background as a psychotherapist, and we're going to get into so many cool things that you've done, but what would you say are the main things that clients have come to you through the years? What are the big issues around boundaries that people come to you with?
I think it's really not being able to, as I say in the subtitle of my book, talk true, that there is a lot of people pleasing, saying yes when you really want to say no, over giving, over committing, and even over delivering, like in business, where doing more than, stuff that's outside of the purview of the contract, let's say, because you're really being driven by sort of this need for people pleasing. I would say that those are the things that come in the most to my therapy practice, is women who are exhausted, feel like they have autoimmune disorders, or just are not happy. Like they're living a life that from the outside, people are like, she is crushing it, amazing. But they're like, why am I like empty?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting, especially for women, because I see that in myself and my friends. It sneaks in the little places where we say yes and we don't mean it. Because I can see people who think, oh, I have really good boundaries with my friends or family. But it's the little places where someone says, do you want to go to a movie? And you go, yes, when you really just want to stay home in your pajamas and eat popcorn and watch Netflix on your own. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that's where the crossing of our own boundaries starts, are in the very small ways. So I'm curious, in all the people that you've worked with through the years, where do the boundaries start? How you work with people? Is it from a bigger picture of boundaries, or is it from the smaller ways that we cross our boundaries?
It's actually people saying yes, like I'll go to the movies with you when I really want to be home. That is an internal boundary. So when we are falling down on ourselves, when we say yes, when we want to say no, when we're overgiving, that is a boundary issue inside. So if clients would come in and talk about this, like, they would always be an external focus, like how nervy Betty is to ask, because they didn't have the boundary skills and the language to say no when they really wanted to say no. So you'll notice that people with disordered boundaries or dysfunctional boundaries, or when I, in my 20s, had them, I would be so mad at the person who I thought was taking advantage of me, quote unquote, who was super entitled. When really I learned through many years of my own therapy before I was a therapist that I could actually just say no. And you can say it nicely, and you can say, thank you so much for thinking of me, but actually I'm beat, I want to stay home. And you don't have to really abandon yourself, because that is exactly what you're doing. You are people pleasing because your friend wants you to go. So with clients, it's important to figure out, well, what is the origin of this? Because, we're not like, we don't come out of the womb this way. This is learned behavior. This is stuff that we saw, this modeled behavior growing up. And so I created this little tool to make it easy for clients to understand anywhere that you're stuck in your life right now. So in this case, we're talking about someone saying yes when they want to say no repeatedly. You're not talking about, because you were saying before, Ariane, like, you're leaking energy every time. that it's a cumulative effect when you are doing this a lot. All of us say yes when we want to say no sometimes, because in relationships, we make decisions, we compromise. That's not what we're talking about here, though. We're talking about a pattern of behavior that is chronic and that is negatively impacting the way the person feels. So to figure it out, I came up with this quick tool, which I'll just share with you quickly, of how to figure out how to get unstuck is what I call it. And it's really about secondary gain. From a therapeutic point of view, we call it secondary gain, which is the unobvious gain of continuing to do things, habits, behaviors, interactions with others that we say we don't want to do, or that would be obviously not desirable. And so we ask a couple of questions about what do I get to not feel, not face, or not experience by staying stuck in this pattern. So you can guess in that case, right, with the friend asking you to go to the movies, you get to not face, feel, experience rejecting your friend, telling the truth about how you feel and what you want, and maybe having them be angry, right? You get to avoid what you fear might be a confrontation or an uncomfortable moment. And those things are pretty powerful if you're someone who's very conflict avoidant. But once we reveal that, so any situation, you could find yourself in a repeated situation with unavailable partners, people who are emotionally unavailable. If you ask those same questions, what do I get to not face, not feel, not experience by being with this unavailable partner, you would have your answer. Oh, I get to not experience deep intimacy, which means I think in my mind, I won't be deeply hurt. I'm not that invested. It's like a protective measure, even if you are consciously saying, no, I really want to be in a relationship. But if your behavior, we have to look at the patterns of our behavior, because that tells us that there's something else going on, because there's always a parallel process going on.
This is so great. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, because as a business coach and life coach myself for many, many years, I'm always encouraging clients to look at things this way, because it's always the same. Like, if, for example, what you said, like unavailable partners. Oh, it's the guy. I always go for this unavailable guy or this unavailable woman. It's always blamed outside the self. And so I am always saying, what is your part in this? Because you wouldn't be doing this unless you were getting something out of it. But everyone says, no, I'm not. It's terrible. Are you kidding me? I feel terrible. Of course, I'm not getting anything out of it. But I always understand that we wouldn't be doing it unless we were getting something. Right?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I always say in relationships, when people are wanting to blame, that's also, by the way, that is an indication of disordered emotional boundaries, to blame others for our unhappiness in life, because we're all responsible for ourselves. But I always say, listen, you are 50% of every relationship that you're in, no matter how the other person is behaving. Your 50% is staying. Your 50%, like, it can't be more than that. Nobody can be more responsible than that when we're in a dyad, right? When there's two people. And I also think that therapeutically, I always say to my clients, hey, you are the common denominator in every experience in your life. And clients a lot of times will think, well, I'm sure this happens to everyone. I'm like, that doesn't matter. First of all, no, that's not true. But secondly, what matters is what's repeatedly happening in your life. That is where our answers are, is we look at the patterns to understand, what are you repeating? Because the way the human mind works, Freud would call it repetition compulsion. I call it repeating boundary realities or repeating relationship realities, where for whatever reason, when we have dramatic or traumatic experiences in childhood, we have a tendency to repeat them. Now, that sounds counterintuitive. You're like, hello, why would I do that? Especially if it was something that when you were growing up, you were like, I'm never going to do that, whatever your parents did that you thought you were going to do so much better when you got old. Unless you have some intervention, some understanding of what's in the basement of your mind, I call it, right? That's your unconscious mind. And so much of the process of what I teach in the book, what I teach in my courses, is I'm literally guiding you because look, I'm nobody's guru. Like, I don't know your answers, Ariane, right? But I definitely know where they are. So I'm like a really accurate GPS to walk you down those basement steps with my little miner's lamp on my head. And let's find the information that is fueling or driving these unsatisfying repetitions in adult life. Because what it really means is that there's some original injury that is still charged in some way, that if we can go there, honor that, write about it. I've got a bunch of exercises I give clients to do and different things in the book as well. The stickiness that is driving the repetition, once we honor what happened originally, the original injury, your compulsion to repeat is greatly lessened.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really helping heal from the origin of the wounding. And so any of you that are listening to this, I always encourage you to think along of your own places where you're stuck or where you feel like you're repeating patterns, and follow along with us as we're talking about this, because you're going to start uncovering your own patterns as you're listening to this conversation with Terri, because you're bringing up so many amazing points of, you're really going back to that place of origin, like you say, that from parents, from society, from culture, that's in overlaid onto us when we're kids. And just so anyone listening understands, this happens to every single one of us, because when we're kids, we're imprinted with whatever is given to us, basically, because our little tiny brains can't figure it out ourselves, and we're reliant on other people to keep us alive. So basically, kind of whatever they say and do and tell us, we believe, because we don't have a mind that can discern otherwise. So then these little patterns get stuck, these little boundary issues get stuck, and we just keep playing them out for the rest of our lives, basically, until we meet someone like Terri and have the book, Boundary Boss, that can actually help us uncover these patterns and these places where we've crossed our boundaries so many times to really heal them. And what you said was really profound, of like, in every relationship, you're responsible for your 50%. And that is any relationship, whether it's personal or business or anything. And that is a very, very important point that I want to really help my listeners understand, is that you can't walk around, or you can, because many people do walk around blaming. It's not helpful to walk around blaming this other person for all the stuff, because you're responsible for your boundaries and how you show up in that relationship. And that's what I find as adulting can be hard, because it's like, I feel that myself. I'm like, I don't want to take responsibility. Like, it's easier just to like blame and like be a victim sometimes. And it's kind of hard to take responsibility sometimes. So I'm curious, how do you work with people around that?
Well, I've seen both sides of that coin, where you have people who are, blaming others, but then I have tons of women who come through my practice who overly blame themselves, who take responsibility for things that are not theirs, who feel responsible. So if we're looking at the dynamics of, let's say, codependency, when I started my practice, women who were very much like I was, so very ambitious, sort of type A, getting it done women, were drawn to my work. And I would see them basically, coming in, and they're exhausted, and I see what they're doing, and I would bring up, oh, hey, what I'm witnessing is that there's codependency in this dynamic. And they would immediately be like, no, hell no, you have no idea what you're talking about. No, hello, I'm the person that everyone comes to. Everyone's dependent on me, Terri. So you're confused. And I'm like, no, you just don't know what codependency is. So I changed the moniker, because there's been this sort of this negative vibe, or this limited understanding. It's sort of Melody Beatty, codependent no more. You have to be involved with an addict. You're the enabler. That's what codependency is. And that's actually not what it is. I mean, it's that and so very much more. So I created this new name, high functioning codependency, because that is exactly what I would identify with, exactly what my clients would identify with. And as soon as I change that, and I'll tell you what my definition is of that, it means that you're overly invested in the feeling states, the decisions, the outcomes, and the circumstances of the people in your life, to the detriment of your internal peace, maybe your bank account, maybe your physical well-being. Because listen, we're all lovers. We're all invested in those things of the people we care about. But I'm talking about an extreme because at its base, codependency is an overt or covert bid for control. We don't want our friend making that mistake. We don't want our partner switching their job because they're doing something. So we're literally trying to control what other people are doing by being, giving unasked for advice and criticism all the time, always stepping up, like over functioning in our relationships. And then how do we end up feeling besides physically exhausted? We're also kind of bitter about it. We feel taken advantage of, even though we're offering it up. And this is really the seeds of the martyr complex that, a lot of my clients had moms who were martyrs. Mine isn't, but I've seen many who have that. And they'd say, I'm never going to do that. Like I'm never going to try to guilt people. And yet I could see once you get on this train, this codependency train, whether it's high functioning or not, there's literally one stop, which is just Martyrville. Like you will only end up in that place because you're giving from a dysfunctional place. You're giving out of fear. You're giving with a desire to control. You're giving really because this is how you feel important, unconsciously, of course. And again, I'm not blaming because, our minds are pretty complex. But if you're doing a lot more than the other people that you're in relationships with, there's an overfunctioning and underfunctioning dynamic that you could take a person who is perfectly functional. And if you are a massively high functioning codependent, before you know it, that person is underfunctioning because you're doing it all. And it does become incredibly unsatisfying. So I talk quite a bit about this in the book because high functioning or regular codependency, this is inherent in that is dysfunctional boundaries. That's it. You can't have good boundaries and be codependent at the same time.
It's so interesting because so many women, I can imagine, have this running where none of us want to be codependent. It's again that like label, that responsibility of like, I don't want to be codependent, but it's like, this is, I hear what you're saying is it's not our fault. It's unconscious and it's coming out in a way of trying to control or a place of fear. And this is where the compassion for ourselves comes in too, in all of this, that it's okay that we are high functioning codependent women and that we have boundary, opportunities that can be strengthened. It's not a weakness. It's not an imperfection. It's a part of life. And I feel like no one escapes humanity. We're all going to come up against I've yet to meet one person that's like, I have great boundaries and always have. It's a human function.
Also, think about the way we were raised, right? Most of us, if you were raised as a woman, you were raised and praised for being a self-abandoning codependent. I mean, that's a fact. We got props for being as generous as possible. Be nice, be a good girl. Don't make waves. Don't be difficult. Think about it. The moment a woman asserts herself, she's hysterical, she's a shrew, she's mean, none of those things are true. But we were raised and taught, it was like we were indoctrinated into this belief that to be a woman, you must be all giving. You hear statements like, oh, she's amazing. She would give the shirt off her back to anyone. And you're like, yes. Keep your shirt on, Betty. Like, why are you giving your shirt to anyone? How about some discernment? I mean, yes, a little baby who needs your shirt, perhaps, but not anyone. And yet that's considered a good thing and not a bad thing. And so the beginning process of going from having disordered boundaries to really being empowered in your life with boundaries is understanding that this is just like a language, and you would not expect to be fluent in a language that no one ever taught you. You wouldn't make yourself wrong. You wouldn't beat yourself up. You wouldn't feel like you're weak, but you would know that if you wanted to be fluent, it is your responsibility to find the right teacher, or in this case, could be the right book or the right course, and take responsibility for learning it. Because I didn't learn this at home or in high school or in college or in graduate school. When I went to grad school to become a therapist, like literally there was nothing. I learned all of this through my own therapeutic process and then seeing the same things over and over again in my therapy practice. Every woman who came in, whether they were wanting to get a divorce, whether they had an eating disorder, whether they were not making the money they should be making, a man was making more than them at their job. Every single one of their presenting problems, as we call them, I could literally connect the dots backwards to lack of this skill set. And I'm going to just tell you my definition, because there's a lot of ways of describing having healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
I say that it means that you know your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, and you have the ability to communicate them early and often in all of your relationships.
Ooh, so sexy. So sexy. This is so yummy. We're going to take a quick break. I'm so excited to just ask you 8,000 more questions and hear more about your life too. But we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. You're listening to Fun for Life Radio on the Dash Radio family. And we've got a ton of great shows here on Fun for Life. One of them that I love to listen to is Truth and Tunes with Pili Montilla. She is a cultural music expert and she interviews really awesome musicians from all over the world. So songwriters, artists, producers. So you will love her show if you love music at all. And she also has a show. We also have a show called In Love with Jack C. Merrick, which is super fun. It's funny that I'm talking about this in this interview with Terri Cole, because his show is all about love songs, but it's not just like love gooey songs. It's also about codependency in love and like breakups and like the real things that happen in love. So check out In Love with Jack C. Merrick, and that premieres on Wednesday night. All right, we'll be right back.
Fun for Life Radio, because creativity is intelligence having fun.
Okay, we're back with Terri Cole. You're listening to Rock Your Life with Arian Alexander. And this is just the juiciest convo all about boundaries. And I understand that you have a boundary bill of rights, which sounds super exciting. Tell us, what's that?
Yes, it's actually something that I created because people are so confused about what are we allowed to have? Like, what are our boundary rights? So I created the Boundary Boss Bill of Rights. And if you see, it's directly in the front of the book, because I kind of wanted to be with the readers like, okay, we're all establishing these are your rights. And I'm going to teach you how to be able to communicate well enough to enforce them to whatever. So the first one is you have a right to say no or yes to others without feeling guilty.
Ooh, that's a big one. I mean, that's
a big one.
Like if we just started there, that's a game changer for life.
That's a fact. And that is literally what you just said is not an exaggeration. That when you start to realize that it's you don't need to feel guilty, it's not helping you in your life. If you feel guilty, if it's a chronic state, then something needs to be changed. In the beginning, when you start more effectively asserting your boundaries and prioritizing your preferences and those types of things, you will feel guilty, but that's a phase of your transformation. I call it the in-between, because the way you used to do it doesn't work that well anymore because you know too much. And then the new way, you haven't mastered it, let's say. So there is this period of time, and in the book, I walk you through it, and we're there together. And if you take a course with me, you're there with hundreds of other women, and actually just humans at this point, it's men and women, where it's normal to feel this way. But it is not normal to feel chronically guilty when you're not people pleasing. It is a very ingrained and habituated response, and it won't last. You just have to stay the course. So it's very liberating to say no or yes to others without feeling guilty. Number 2, you have the right to make mistakes, to course correct, or to change your mind.
Oh, again, game changer. Because again, like how many times, men or women, have you, all of us, said yes, And then I'll give you an example of how this just showed up for me. If someone asked me to do something like go to dinner or something, and I'm like, I don't really want to, but okay, I feel guilty, say no. Like they've asked me maybe 3 times, so I'll go. And my intuition is saying, don't go. But I override it because I'm like, well, I've made the commitment. And so I said yes. And then I go, and then it's like a shit show. Like something happens and it's like a 6-hour dinner and I'm exhausted and there's traffic and there's a car wreck and I can't get home, whatever it is, and I'm like, why didn't I listen to myself and change my mind and say, you know what, I said yes, but I really am not feeling it, but I don't give myself that permission. So I hear that, and it always, and then I get mad at myself. I get mad at the other person, and it's just not happy. It's not a good thing to do, is it?
It's not. And keep in mind, if we don't give ourselves permission to change our minds, to course correct, when we realize, like in that moment you're talking about, in that moment, you realized that I said yes, but I don't want to. You should have gone back and said, hey, you know what? I'm actually too beat to do tonight. I hope you guys have a great time. Thanks for thinking of me, and out. That is course correcting. That is allowing yourself to change your mind. What ends up happening is that if we don't do that, every decision you make carries the weight of a life sentence.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's,
right.
Yeah. Ooh, this is so good. Okay. What else? Number 3.
All right, number 3.
These are life-changing lessons we're having here with Terri Cole.
You have the right to negotiate for your preferences, desires, and needs. So that's not saying, right? Like, not just that you have a right to have them fulfilled, to want them to be fulfilled. You have a right to negotiate for them. And I have to say, I find women in my practice find this unbecoming behavior. They find it, they don't want to negotiate. The second someone says no, they're like, okay, I'm never doing that again. Or I'm very, very tender about the no. And I really want to normalize the idea, the notion of negotiating for what you want. This is how you get what you want. And I'm not saying at the expense of trampling over other people, but I am saying what you want is not less or more important than what other people want, right? To you, it has to be more important though, right? What you want has to be more important. And that doesn't mean that when we're in relationships, we don't compromise. We don't also prioritize what our partner wants. Of course we do. We have children doing crap we don't want to do all the time. I mean, but it's knowing what you want and then having the courage to kind of go for it.
Yeah, that's a really important lesson right there of negotiation. I think I hear what you're saying, especially in business when women get a no. I mean, and again, this is a generalization. We're not saying all women. I'm sure there's some women who are really good at negotiation and asking for what they need. But I would say in the most, I'm a woman. I've had a lot of women friends. This negotiation part, and first of all, asking for what we need and want. Oh my gosh, it's like so scary. I have a lot of friends who teach sexuality and how to really empower themselves with their partners and their sexuality. And it's a huge, huge thing to ask for what you need and want with your partner in that romantic space. And right, it's that fear of rejection and a fear of it not being okay and a fear of it not being met. And so I really understand that and hear that. And I love that you're empowering women and men to we do get to negotiate. We do get to ask for what we need. And you teach it how in your book, right? You teach us how to do it. And it's one thing to like go, you get to do it, but you actually teach us how.
Right. You're like, thanks for the information, but I would like a roadmap, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I give you that in the book. And you said something, Ariane, that I think is important, where you may have women in particular who are great at this at work and just disastrous in their romantic relationships. So, how that yoga phrase, like, how you do anything is how you do everything. That's from a psychological viewpoint, not exactly true. All right, moving on. You have the right to express and honor all of your feelings if you so choose.
Oh, good one. Yeah, it's scary. I hear you say that, and just myself, my reaction is like, oh, that's scary. Like, and that's where this was where the childhood wounding comes in. So if you're listening, however you're responding to this Bill of Rights that Terri's going through, this is your wounding. This is where you got stuck. This is where I got stuck. It's like, oh, it's not okay. It's like not safe to share all my emotions.
Oh my God, that's so funny that you use the word safe, because I was going to say, and that I purposely put in if you so choose, because you are not required to share the way you feel with unsafe individuals or with anyone for that matter. It's always your choice. So that's so interesting that you said it was unsafe in childhood. And that is the thing, of course, that we then carry into adulthood, because in childhood, these things we learned in childhood were adaptive for the circumstance that we were in. So like, yay, 7-year-old me that figured out a way to be hurt less, or figured out a way to get out of a harm's way. If you had a chaotic family system, addicted system, nobody needs to send you like a memo as to how to stay out of the line of fire. You know what you need to do. If you have a parent who isn't parenting, then you become a parentified child and you start cooking dinner in 5th grade or 4th or 3rd or whatever, because that needed to happen. And you did it, and that is adaptive. Those exact things that might have spared us or saved us in childhood become maladaptive in adult relationships, because we're no longer in that situation. But that's where we didn't get the memo that we're grown up now, and that we don't have to have that hypervigilance around safety in the exact same way. And so we do walk through a bunch of this in the book as well, identifying where am I having a transference reaction? Where am I responding in this present moment from, fueled from an unresolved experience in the past? Because when you can identify those things, you can bring yourself back to this present moment, back into your adult self. And really, it's super simple. I'll just quickly share with you a tool that people can use.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation and it feels, how you can tell is where inside of you, you know that your reaction is amplified for what has happened. You're having a bigger reaction, or you feel really scared in a way that as an adult, if your life isn't being threatened, you don't normally feel, because these are child feelings. The feeling of like really an amplified sense of fear. Maybe you get mad really fast about something, like 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. These are indications that you might be having a transference reaction. So you can ask yourself these questions. Think back. And first of all, no judgment. Like this whole book, my whole thing, like it's just a no judgment zone, because we'll never get anything done. So just forget about what you should have known, what you didn't know. Hi, you're here now. Right. Yay. I'm so glad you're here now.
Exactly.
Let's start the journey. Just stop wasting energy beating yourself up. It's just such a waste. Anyway, so you're going to ask yourself, who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? And how is this behavioral dynamic, the way I'm interacting, how is that familiar to me? Did I witness it? Maybe you saw parental impactors, as I like to call your parents, if you had parents. The adults in your life maybe interacted this way. Or maybe when you're in that interaction, another question you can ask is, who do I become metaphorically? And who does the other person become in this dynamic? They might become your punitive parent. You might become your 9-year-old self. To stop that from happening, right? Because you will not be empowered if you are in the mindset of your 9-year-old self, because it's very transportive. It feels incredibly real. Your feelings are real. You feeling threatened, that's not in your mind. That's in your body. That's like a memory of something. So it's like, value it rather than being like, oh, that's not now. No, but you're right. That's not now. But what happened then needs your attention. There's something happening. Sometimes, though, I'd say 50 or 60% of this experience, this transference, we can get rid of simply by naming it, identifying like, oh my God, when I interact with my boss, he becomes my mean father. I become my 9-year-old self, which is why I can never get my words out. Okay, and then we can reassure ourselves like, okay, you know what though? My boss isn't my dad. I'm not 9. Like, I actually am safe right now. So let me get back into my adult head and go forward. So there's something that you can do rather than just being, unwittingly jumping in a time machine that you really don't want to get into and don't even know that you have gotten into.
Yeah, it's cool that you give very specific tools and how to work with this. That's very helpful.
Yes, it is. Because all the theory in the world doesn't do crap to change your life. Because you're all very smart. That's great. You can intellectually get it. If you can't apply it, who cares? You could just be reading People magazine. All right, moving on. You have the right to voice your opinion, even if others disagree.
Ooh, love it.
And again, you don't have to. Like, do you have to have a brawl with your racist Uncle Bob? You don't. You can. But you're not required to either. And I think that that's important. You have a right to just say, hey, I disagree with that, or I think differently. I do think, I make the distinction between, do we say something if someone is making a terribly misogynistic comment, making a terribly racist comment, making a homophobic comment? For me personally, that's more of an integrity thing, where I don't care if it's Uncle Bob or anyone else. I'm not letting that go. But if I know Uncle Bob is this way, I'm also going to not engage with him, right? You can avoid that. So back to the next one is you have the right to be treated with respect, consideration, and care.
Wow. That's just beautiful. Giving ourselves permission for that.
But it's also got to come from you,
Right. Treating yourself with that.
Well, that's the first step, because here's the thing. You set the bar for every other relationship in your life. People are looking at you. And if you have a low opinion of yourself, if you talk badly about your ass, your face, your prospects, your career, your love life, whatever, if you're last on your own list, if your self-care is terrible, you will inevitably attract people who agree with that low self-assessment. So I say, raise the bar nice and high, and treat yourself with respect, consideration, and care, and expect others to treat you that way too.
Perfect.
You have the right to determine who has the privilege of being in your life.
That's a big one, that especially as we get older. I think when we're younger, we're just like, oh, they're my friends and this is how it goes. But as I see myself getting older and my friends too, we definitely get more selective. And it's important to understand that that's part of your right.
It is. And here's the thing, you visualize it like this, like there's a VIP section in your life, but you're the only bouncer and you make the guest list.
I love that. Right? You're the bouncer of your VIP section. That's amazing.
You are, though. And if you don't, then what are you doing? You're spending all this time with like your third cousin who can't wait to crash your bachelorette party. And she's like, we're family, though. You're like, get out.
Yeah.
Not on the list, Betty. Sorry.
That's amazing.
Okay. We have 3 more. You have the right to communicate your boundaries, limits, and deal breakers.
Yeah.
And you got to know what those things are. When I call your deal breakers, they're like your non-negotiables in relationships. And I want to be super clear that you don't need anyone else's permission to have them. I remember when I was dating, and I was saying to one of my friends, and I stopped drinking when I was 21. And I said to my friend, she's like, oh, I'll set you up with, this person, whatever. And she said, they're in recovery. And I said, no, you know what? I don't want to date anyone in recovery. And she was like, why? Are you biased against people in recovery when you are in recovery? And I was like, no, if you have to know, it's because it's triggering to me to be around someone else who has addiction issues. And I just don't want it. I did explain to her, I gave her context, which is not the same as convincing her that I had the right to that boundary. But she didn't need to understand that. And this may happen in your relationships too. Like your deal breaker, those are your own. And the same thing with your boundaries and your limits. Someone can say to you, and because I've heard this many, many times in my practice, well, then my boyfriend said to me, well, you shouldn't feel that way. That's like ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we come up with a phrase for them to say, which is, oh, hey, I'm just telling you how I feel, not asking your opinion about my feelings. So I would love it if you could try to hear how I feel. You don't need to understand it. Like literally, I don't need your permission to feel that way. I already feel that way. It's like trying to shut the barn door after the horses are already like, you shouldn't feel that way. P.S. Too late. I already do. I'm telling you, right? So ridiculous. All right, we have two more. You have the right to prioritize your self-care without feeling selfish.
Big one for women. I mean, all of these are huge, but that, especially women with kids, I just see this all the time. Of the woman is last. It's the kids, it's the husband, it's everything else except for her.
Yep. And how what is her vibe like in the house? And what is her tone like?
Yeah. It's short. She's short and she's not happy and she's stressed. And then, you know, a little, what's that, like resentful against all that she has to do.
Yeah. And you're like, trust me, when you up your self-care, everyone in your life benefits. Because then you can give from free will.
Yeah.
And because now you're filling up your own bucket a little bit. And so there's something to actually give rather than just running on empty, because you can only do that for so long, you know?
Yeah, beautiful.
All right. And the last one is the subtitle of the book. You have the right to talk true, be seen, and finally live free.
Ooh, yeah. Talk true, be seen, and finally live free. Wow, it's beautiful. It's so powerful. All of this Bill of Boundary Rights is so powerful. And I think it's important for anyone listening to understand that you're not going to get all of these in one day or 1 month. Like this is right.
You're not.
Because we've all had a lifetime of creating these, I don't like to use the word issues, but that's all I can think of right now. Issues and boundaries. We spent a lifetime creating these patterns. They're not just going to go away overnight. So that's why I think it's important to understand that, you get to choose into one or two of these and work on that for a while and shift your life around that. Like, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, of course I could use opportunities in all these areas, but I have to think about what are the big ones for me? Like, what can I really do this week that will feel empowering around boundaries for myself? And I think that's a good place to start. I mean, and I can't wait. Your book just, oh my gosh, like, wow. And it just came out. And so you have it. This is so great for anyone listening. Like, you actually give the tools to walk through how to do this. And this is, it's just like a miracle for anyone, because all of us can relate to this. I mean, there's not one part of this conversation we can't relate to.
I know. You can get the book at boundarybossbook.com, because I've also created a whole bunch of bonuses, and I actually have a special bonus for your listeners, because we talked quite a bit about codependency. I have a special little, it's just, I'll give you the URL and you guys can go check out a little video that I did for you in a downloadable guide, so you can really get an idea of where are you in this process right now. How are you overgiving quite a bit in your life or not? How is it impacting you? So you're going to go to boundaryboss.me/rock your life.
Ooh, boundaryboss.me/rock your life. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to go look at that. So definitely go get that free gift from Terri, because that sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's personalized to this conversation that we're having today. So thank you so much for that, Terri. And sure. I think what's cool, I was just thinking as you were saying that about the codependency, because I think when we hear codependency, we definitely position it into more of a personal relationship, because we've heard it in that context. But like in my own life, and I'm sharing this because, again, like, I like to help my listeners just really think about all these things in all aspects of life, in business, personal, family, whatever it is. I was codependent for my boss of 12 years in my first career in the fashion business, because he was like a genius, and he was also very, mercurial. Like, I had to walk on eggshells because I was always afraid I was going to get in trouble or he was going to yell. And so I learned, and I was like, when I reflect back, I'm like, well, I did that with other people in my family. So then I was just playing out that pattern with my boss of 12 years. And I still have to catch myself now, because I still, in business relationships and personal, I still watch myself wanting to start walking on eggshells and make it okay for everybody and not make waves. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so innate and it comes up so fast. So the codependency covers lots of different aspects of life.
Oh yeah. It's not just one area, but part of why we care is that it is unhealthy and limits, in a way, it limits our success. It's stealing our bandwidth, stealing our joy. And I think so much of the time women in particular, don't even know, why am I so tired, or why am I so irritable? Why is everyone annoying me? And when you start to identify these problematics, I give you a bunch of inventories to do in the book. It's a very interactive book. It's not just theory. It's all about the reader, right? Because that's who I'm helping, where you get to do an inventory of like, what relationships do I walk on eggshells in? What relationships do I leave the interaction feeling energized, excited, positive, seen? Which ones do I leave the interaction feeling drained, exhausted, and like I just got beat up, right? When I see someone's name on my phone, am I like, yay? Or am I like, oh, dread?
Yeah.
That's important to know.
That's good. That inventory is good. Ooh, that's powerful. Oh my God, this is awesome. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and we haven't even talked about this whole part of your life where you were a talent agent, and oh my God, like we got to dish about that. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Rock Your Life with Arian Alexander, and we are on Fun for Life Radio on the Dash Radio Network.
Fun for Life Radio, because fun is habit forming.
Okay, if you're just jumping in with us, I'm Arian Alexander, and this is Rock Your Life with Arian Alexander, and I have my amazing guest, Terri Cole. This has been such an mind-blowing conversation about boundaries. Her book is Boundary Boss, and she's going to give you more information of where you can get it and how you can get it, because I think we all need to run out and get it like today. Like yesterday, we should have gotten it. But I think one thing is cool in your past, I'm in the entertainment business. I live in Los Angeles, and I'm in the entertainment business as well. I have like 3 different careers because I'm a true Gemini and I like to do a lot of things. But I think it's so interesting that you have a past. You're a psychotherapist and you're an author, an empowerment expert, but you were also a talent agent at one point for models. And tell me about what that experience was like.
Well, I was, in the end of my career, before I left, I was running the East Coast, part of an operation, and I was negotiating contracts for supermodels and celebrities the last, I'd say 5 years of my career. And that, by the end of that, because I had been on my own therapeutic journey, I could no longer deny that it was time to leave, because I just didn't care about the movie deals or the Pantene contracts. I only cared about the mental health of my clients, getting people into therapy, eating disorder clinics, drug treatment clinics. And I was like, listen, you have to get out of here and do what you're meant to do, because there's got to be something more empowering than making supermodels richer than you could do, that you could do with your life. But it was it took me a couple of years to do it, because, according to everyone in my life, I was like at the height of my career, height of my success, yet I was not happy. And so I quit that job and went to NYU and became poor again. But I loved it. The second I took my first abnormal psych class at NYU, I was like, oh yes, I want to do this until the end of time. And that has never changed for me. It's been 24 years.
Wow. That's so cool. I'm so glad you shared this. I have a similar journey myself that I will share more on another episode of Rock Your Life. But it's because it's so easy to think that this, quote, success in this world we live in is the brass ring. And you had the brass ring and you were like, I'm still unfulfilled. And this is a boundary thing. See, most people, right? I mean, I'm listening to this going, that's a huge boundary thing right there. Most people would have stayed in that career for the rest of their lives because it was good money. It was glamorous. It's like who doesn't want to be a talent agent with like celebrities and supermodels? Like it sounds so, and it is, it can be fabulous and glamorous. And I know the other side too, because I am in the entertainment business. There's a lot that's happened. There's, like you say, there's a lot of unhappiness. There's a lot of mental health. There's a lot of things happening. So you made a very clear choice to listen to yourself and listen to that boundary that was within you saying, there's something more here and I'm going to follow that lead. And 24 years later, look where you are today,
Right.
Helping people around the world empower themselves in their lives. It's like, it's just gorgeous what you're doing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, but it takes you have to have the courage to do it. And for me, it wasn't courage because people think, oh, that's so brave. It was more, I stayed until I couldn't stay anymore. Like I actually stayed until I was like, you're going to start to do a bad job now. Because you don't care. Like I left right before I would have started to do a bad job because I couldn't do a bad job. Like that's just not an option for me personally. And I was like, but I cannot put my bandwidth into this. So I did hit a tipping point and like a fork in the road where I was like, so where's your integrity? Are you going to leave while it's still intact? Or are you going to phone in this job? And how are you going to feel about that? And the answer was, I'm not going to phone it in because I'm going to feel terrible about that. I'm going to leave instead, which is what I did.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Ooh. So, if you're listening, and I just hear this so many times from people of like, my job is fine. It's okay. And it's like, you get to, like your Bill of Rights that you just talked about, like you get to have more than fine. You get to live a life that's fulfilling and abundant, and you have great boundaries, and you have great people that you choose to be in your VIP club. And I think you just have given me and anyone listening so much inspiration of the possibility of what happens when you really clarify your boundaries and really stand in that. And I want you to tell us one more time where we can find your book, because it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, you can find it pretty much anywhere, anywhere books are sold. But I encourage you then to go to boundarybossbook.com because I have a whole bunch of really juicy gifts, from meditations to the Boundary Boss Bill of Rights in a downloadable something that you can have on your phone. Like there's a whole bunch of nice stuff at boundarybossbook.com.
Okay, cool. And then for the listeners, it's boundaryboss.me/rockyourlife for our free gift for the codependency. Cool.
Yes.
Awesome. Oh my God. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Well, I clearly could obviously talk to you for so long because I love what you're doing and how you're showing up in the world. But we're going to wrap, and I'm going to just ask you some lightning round questions off the top of your head of what would you say in this launch of this book, what's your dream in doing this book at this time?
I just want to empower as many human beings across the globe as possible. I've had, 198 countries taken my course on boundaries called Boundary Bootcamp. I just want this ripple of empowering, and listen, it's men and women, but I'd say 90% of my audience is women, that I want to help you lessen your suffering and elevate your joy and satisfaction, because this is how we're going to change the world. You can't live small. We need you so desperately. And disordered boundaries, it's not good or bad. It's not weak or strong. They're dysfunctional, and they will limit your level of success, your level of being known. And like, what a tragedy to not actually be known for your unique, amazing self.
Oh, I got chills. Oh, God, this is so delightful. Okay, cool. All right, Terri, one more question. What advice would you give 20-year-old Terri?
Friggin' relax. just friggin' relax. It's all going to work out. Just stop worrying so much.
Is that the same advice you'd give to 30-year-old Terri and 40-year-old Terri?
Probably. Chill out.
Chill out.
Still hasn't happened.
I know, right? I'm still working on that one. It is so funny because I promise you every guest I interview says the same thing. Because I like that question, and it's always the same thing, like, chill out, everything is going to be okay. So it's so interesting. If we're all saying that to a younger version of self, why aren't we listening to it ourselves right now? Because in a year, I'm going to say the same thing to myself. Why was I so worried?
Well, listen, it's getting better by degrees. So my feeling is, if you're someone who is, I took my workaholism that was like so much ambition, I thought, but a lot of it fear-driven stuff. I've moved that. So I'm not a total workaholic anymore. I feel like because a book launch kicks up doing something new, doing something I wasn't masterful at doing. This is my first book, even though I've been doing this for decades. It really kicked up the workaholism thing again. Just like you can slip back, like when you're in recovery, you can have like a slip. So I feel like now that the book is out, I'm literally looking at my calendar and being like, no, I'm only doing interviews on this day. Like, you need a life besides this.
Yeah.
But I do see that being in very stressful situations really kicks up, like our winning formula from the past.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to chill out.
Good,
Famous last words.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks again for being here, Terri. This has been so delightful. Her book is Boundary Boss, The Essential Guide to Talk True, Be Seen, and Finally Live Free. And I am just so grateful for you being here today.
It was so much fun. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.